We're halfway through 2024. In the real estate world, it certainly hasn't gone exactly like we had hoped or expected, and yet I think there are several reasons to be cautiously optimistic. The unknown of the market is the hardest part right now, because when you're uncertain, it's hard to make a decision. And if you make a decision when you don't know, you run the risk of making a greater mistake. But here's exactly what we do know right now in 2024 and how it's going to help you as a buyer or seller get through the rest of this year. Home sales are down nationwide. According to Lawrence Young, the chief economist at the National Association of Realtors, home sales have lingered at 30-year lows, and since 70 million more Americans live in this country now compared to 3 decades ago, it's inevitable that sales will rise in coming years. Inventory will grow steadily from more home construction, and various life-changing events will require people to trade up, trade down, or move to another location. Right now, the US is projected to sell just under 5 million homes in 2024. The average consumer probably isn't too concerned with tracking this number, but what's interesting to note is how the sales of this year compare to others. Current projections from Statista put the home sales for 2024 at just around 4.62 million, and the projected sales for 2025 are just over 5.3 million. The other interesting prediction is home price expectations. Some industry leaders have been more optimistic than others, but I think the most important takeaway from this is the fact that none of them have predicted that prices and values are going to depreciate anytime soon. In fact, the average of all 7 of these experts is an appreciation of 2.8%. By the end of the year, I'm predicting that we're probably going to see an average of about 3 or 4% appreciation for 2024, which is healthier. I know, if you are trying to sell a home, you want appreciation to skyrocket so that you can sell your home for an amazing price. But those unicorn years during the pandemic where appreciation was off the chain, those weren't good. And those appreciation years are why we're currently dealing with the affordability issues we have right now. And Jessica Lotz, the deputy chief economist at NAR, the National Association of Realtors, said, one thing that seems pretty solid is home prices are going to continue to go up. And the reason is we don't have housing inventory. So let's break that down, because this next graph is actually one of my favorite ones that I've seen come out of NAR. It breaks down the inventory discussion. When we talk about real estate, we often refer to markets as sellers or buyers markets. When there are more buyers than there are houses for sale, the inventory is lower than the demand. And that's when we have a seller's market. When that flips and there are more homes for sale than there are buyers who are interested in buying them, the demand lessens, and that's often referred to as a buyer's market. Going back to the late 90s, here's that graph from NAR that talks about home inventory levels. I have often defined a buyer's market as having inventory over 6 months. You can see that NAR defines it as having inventory 7 months or more. And look back in the early 2000s. Leading up to the crash of 2008, there was so much inventory. Then follow the graph up through the most recent pandemic, and you can see the trend of housing inventory drop considerably. When there aren't enough homes for sale, that tends to put pressure on home prices. Think of the basic economics 101 of supply and demand. When there's not enough of something and people want it, that increased demand and that decreased supply cause for the price of that item to be higher, because people have a demand and they're going to pay it. So when inventory is low in housing, prices rise. And you can see on the graph that in the last year or two, the inventory is starting to catch back up, but the inventory still isn't high enough for there to be any meaningful downward shift in prices. This is also hugely driven by the mortgage rates. They're currently hovering in the low 7s at the time of this filming, and the Fed just announced in June that they only plan to do 1 rate drop for the rest of 2024. And while the Fed does not directly control mortgage interest rates, it influences them. And the magic question truly is, When are rates going to go down? And the second question is, by how much? No one knows for sure, but Fannie Mae, MBA, and NAR all have some predictions. And this is a great visual because when I say things like mortgage rates are going to drop, not every single consumer defines drop the same. If we can get rates solidly into the sixes, that would be great news. And at the same time, buyers should not be waiting or expecting to see 3, 4, or 5% anytime soon. Obviously, if you're trying to make a prediction about mortgage rates, you're probably going to be wrong. But based on what we currently know, the likely scenario is that interest rate drops are going to be greater as we get into the beginning of 2025. Current MBA predictions see rates heading into the mid to possibly low sixes, which will hopefully help a lot of people out there with affordability and help more people get into home ownership, which is ultimately what we all want. The downward rate trend is what we're hoping for. And if it proves to be true, we should see monthly mortgage payments go down. However, that could also drive more home buyers into the market, and with more demand comes higher prices. Hello, multiple offers. The Fed most recently stated that there is going to hopefully be one more drop in 2024. And the question everybody wants to know is, when is that drop going to happen? The vast majority of banks seem to think that September is going to be a likely time to see a vast rate cut from the Fed, which, remember, is not directly correlated to mortgage interest rates, but it does influence them. And because this year is an election year, the timing of the rate drop is going to be interesting. And the Fed's in a bit of a lose-lose situation because if they drop it right before the election, people may think they're trying to sway things. So in an effort not to be correlated to that, it may cause them not to do it in September. So where does that leave you? Is it time to panic, or is it time to buckle down and make something happen? I think it's time for cautious optimism. Dennis Shershikoff, the adjunct professor of economics at City University of New York, said, "When it comes to the real estate forecast for the next 5 years, I'm cautiously optimistic. I believe we're going to see a lot of ebb and flow over the next 5 years. Some highs, some lows, but overall, a healthy market. Prices should continue to rise, though more slowly, and buyers might enjoy some more options as inventory expands. But remember, real estate is profoundly local. What happens on a national scale can manifest differently in your backyard." Real estate in Florida has been doing well, especially compared to some other parts of the country. We have a desirable location and people want to live here. And that's always a good thing when it comes to real estate. Location, location, location. Uncertainty has really been a theme of this year, and throwing a presidential election into the mix only exacerbates that uncertainty. However, knowledge is clarity. The real estate market is going to be fine. Homes are going to continue to rise in value. Interest rates look like they're going to start coming down a bit, and that should help buyers get a handle on a more affordable monthly payment. And the election may cause a slight dip in the market, but it's going to be short and it's going to be temporary. Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. If you still aren't sure, or perhaps you have a very specific and nuanced situation that you're dealing with, my name tag says I'm a realtor, but what it really should say is that I'm a problem solver. That's what I do for a living. If you need help or clarity or problem solving, I'm your girl. I love to approach real estate with data, facts, and education. I think real estate is such an emotional time in people's lives that if we can look at the true data, it really helps give you clarity. And as we look at the data of what happens during presidential elections, believe me, we're gonna be okay. I'm Lindsey Johnson, your resource for all things real estate. See you next time.